And there we've been listening to the US State Department's acting legal advisor, Richard C. Vicek, who was addressing the International Court of Justice at The Hague on day 3 of public hearings into the legal consequences of Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories, which has lasted for nearly 6 decades. We heard the US there warning the court against issuing an advisory that would jeopardize the established UN framework for what he calls lasting peace. He said, such as the immediate withdrawal of Israel without addressing Israeli security needs within the Palestinian territories. Let's bring in Marwan Bishara now. He's Al Jazeera's senior political analyst to discuss this further. Good to have you here, Marwan. You said earlier that you expected the US to defend Israel when it was indefensible. Do you think that's what it did?
Yes, but in a very, very clever way. This is the kind of thing you would expect from a superpower, right? And this is the time when it's anything but vulgar, right? I mean, it's very sober, very clever, and very sophisticated argument. It just doesn't make it any less absurd and any less dishonest, right? The overall message of the American representative is that the court should be at the service of the American-Israeli negotiation strategy. Not that the American-Israeli negotiation strategy should abide by the court ruling.
When it was talking about the UN resolutions that had already been passed, you mean? The framework that exists?
When he said that, when he emphasized that all of this is subject to the framing of the negotiations, not that, for example, what at the heart of these sessions is for the court to say whether the occupation is legal or illegal. Which brings me to the second point. Why should the court ruling that the occupation is illegal be any cumbersome, be any burden on the American-Israeli negotiations? Why? I mean, because otherwise it should be legal? It's illegal. I mean, and the question here is that it's not a question of a few years, a few months, a few weeks. It's been going on for 56 years. And here comes a bit of the dishonesty. Yes, the American position has been, under Trump, later on Biden, at least, right, the past 8 years, whereby America, for example, accepted Israel's annexation of the Golan Heights, a Syrian-occupied territory. So it's not true that America does not accept the inadmissibility of the acquisition of territory by force, because it recognized Israel's annexation of the Golan and recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, which later on President Trump said, I relieved you, Israel, from this whole issue of Jerusalem, right? Now we, America, recognized your annexation of Jerusalem, de facto. So in fact, the United States did take a good number of steps that are in utter violations of international law. And then there's this whole ambiguity about the settlements. Of course, the United States, historically speaking, has taken the position that transferring one's population to an occupied territory, as Israel has done over the years, is illegal. But then it started to become more and more and more ambiguous, so much so that in latter years, it basically accepted them as de facto. It accepted the settlements block as de facto and asked the Palestinians, demanded that the Palestinians swap territory because they must leave those settlements in place. And for me, aside from all the legal issues that I am not exactly versed in, because I'm just basically commenting on the politics of the American presentation, is probably the most important underlying issue in this whole thing, right? And why Israel justifies its occupation, why America accepts Israel's justification for its occupation. And what we've heard here said, I think probably a dozen times, Israel's security.
Right to defend itself.
You put it twice on the questions, right, or something. What is Israel's security? Who defines Israel's security? Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel says Israel's security can only be guaranteed if it takes charge on all the territory from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, which means any future Palestinian state that Mr. whoever his name is talks about is actually going to be under Israeli control. Hence, the American representative doesn't even mention the end of occupation, that the erection, the establishment of the Palestinian state requires ending the occupation. He doesn't even talk about that. Dismantling of the settlements, for example, defining the borders on the 1967, because anything less than that would be accepting the acquisition of territory by force, right? So, once again, quite sophisticated, quite clever, quite sober, right? But quite absurd and dishonest, to be honest. In fact, in terms of what is required of this court, this is the world's court. The world's court cannot be at the disposition and at the service of American Pax Americana, of American-Israeli negotiation tactics.
Well, it'd be interesting to see what happens, because of the 51 countries presenting arguments, only America and Fiji will be arguing against the illegal occupation. So let's argue against the idea of an illegal occupation. So let's see what happens there. Marwan, for the moment, thank you very much.
Thank you.